director of student ministries at Resurrection. And Pastor Ken told me, he said, hey, we got a really jam-packed schedule today. Can you try to keep your message short? So I promised him I'd keep it under 2 hours. So if anyone wants to clock me, I'll pay for your lunch if I go over 2 hours. But delighted to be here with you today. So with all of our nice weather we're finally having, I'm an avid golfer. I love to golf. Any other golfers in the house? All right, good people. Jesus loves you all. The rest of you will be praying for you. I got to go to the Masters this year, and I got to watch that. It was amazing. Now, I'm an avid golfer, but that doesn't mean I'm good. I'm terrible. I'm horrible. My favorite word in golf is mulligan. Does anyone know what a mulligan is? Yes. It's like you do something, you're like, wait, I'm gonna mulligan it. It doesn't count. I get a do-over. So when I play with my dad and my brother every other month or so, especially when we're together, we'll go like every day. And my dad he's not a big mulligan person. So the first rule we always start off with is, okay, what is the mulligan cap per round of golf that we can play? So me and my brother are always like, let's just do 6 per 9 holes. He's like, we'll be here forever. How about 1 per? And sometimes we settle in between. So mulligans is a thing where you do something, you don't like it, you can just take it back, and no one remembers it. It doesn't count. As I was thinking about that, I was thinking, wouldn't mulligans in life be amazing, right? How many of you guys have ever been in a fight with someone and you said something, and right after, as it's leaving, you're like, no, right? Right? Because now you know you're going to spend 30 minutes fighting about the thing you didn't mean to say instead of what you're actually supposed to be fighting about, right? So wouldn't it be great if you're like, talk to your wife or your fiance or your girlfriend, you say something, and like, as she's about to respond, you're like, wait, mulligan. Just gonna mulligan, we're gonna walk it back, we're gonna act like it didn't happen. I was driving, it's funny, I hate highways in California, so last week, I was on the highway for the first time in 2018 on the 405. I know, mate, yes. I PCH everywhere, that's my home, so I don't really count that. So I'm on the highway, heading towards San Diego, and traffic is really slow. I really wish I had someone in my car so I could be going faster, but I'm watching the carpool lane go by. And all of a sudden I see a guy pulled over in the carpool lane. And I'm going like 5 miles an hour on the 405, so I'm gonna get to rubberneck galore. And as I pull up and pass this guy, I just see him sitting there, and he's the only person in this car, right? He's like, oh, I want to speed. So the police officer caught him. And I was thinking, how great would that be if when the cop walked up and was like, license and registration, if he just pulled out his mulligan card, he's like, hey man, just gonna undo this right here. I don't wanna have to pay that fine. Mulligans would be great. The ultimate mulligan in my high school experience, since our 8th graders are about to be high schoolers, my first girlfriend was named Caitlin, C-A-T-E-L-Y-N. My second girlfriend was named Caitlin, C-A-T-E-L-I-N. The first time I texted Caitlin, I love her, it was the wrong Caitlin. So that was great. So I sent it, and she didn't respond. I'm like, what the heck? I blew it. The next day I had this scathing letter or text. We're done, TJ. Time to move on, get over it. And I'm like, oh no, wrong Caitlin. Wrong Caitlin. The same is true though when we look at the stories of the Bible. When we read about these people and these experiences they have in the Bible, if they could have had mulligans, the Bible would read totally different. We see it with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, kind of continuing the reading we had today, with Lot and Lot's wife. So there's clear instructions in Genesis 19. The instructions say, flee for your lives, do not look back, and do not stop anywhere. Keep going, flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away. Skipping forward a couple of verses. But Lot's wife stopped, she looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Yikes. Lot's wife's lack of willingness to keep going proved to be costly, right? If she could mulligan that, she would just kept going. She's not turning around. She's like, all right, I'm making sure I'm going to keep going in that direction. We see it again with the Israelites, right? After they've just gotten out of Egypt, they crossed the Red Sea. They are on the doorstep of the Promised Land. Just a couple miles, they can see where they're supposed to go. But right before they get to the Promised Land, they stop. And in Numbers 14, this is what it says. After stopping, the whole community began to weep out loud, and they cried all night. and their voices rose in a great chorus of protest against Moses and Aaron. If only we had died in Egypt, or even if only we had died in the wilderness. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt instead of going forward? Then they plotted among themselves, let us choose a new leader who will lead us back to Egypt. Who will lead us back to Egypt. They too had this lack of willingness to go, and it proved to be costly. Because of everybody who complained against going to the promised land, not one person ever made it. They wandered the wilderness for 40 years until everyone who didn't want to go into the promised land passed, and then they were able to enter it. Then we see it in the story of King David and Bathsheba, right? 2 Samuel 11. In the spring of the year, when kings normally go to war, David sent Joab and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army, and they laid siege to the city of Rabbah. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. David stayed behind instead of going when the normal time for him to go was. David's lack of willingness to go to war when everyone else did resulted in adultery and murder, and for him to experience the loss of his first child. In each of these mulligan-needing moments, the common thread is that there is a people or person who was called to go somewhere, who was being called or led somewhere, but they stopped going. They stopped going, and so they missed out on what God was promising them. They stopped in the middle of the highway thinking it's safer just to remain put or to throw it in reverse than to continue forward. I studied abroad my junior year in college, and we studied abroad in Paris. And so on the weekends, we would travel to different countries. And I was there with my best friend. My best friend said, hey, let's go to Ireland. There's this tour thing that'll take you to different pubs all the way across Ireland, and it'll be great. And so I was like, all right, sure. So we signed up. We signed up for a week-long tour around Ireland with the only understanding is that we had a tour guide who was going to lead us to some awesome experiences. It was interesting because I was thinking about this. I didn't actually know any of the places we were going, but I trusted that the tour guide did. And I trusted that where we were going was going to be an awesome experience for me. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking, isn't that the same with God? Isn't the same with God? We don't know what next year is going to bring us, let alone tomorrow. But we do know the one who's guiding us. We do know the one who knows the way. Because nothing is unknown to God. Psalm 139:16 says, you saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment has been laid out before a single day has passed. Every moment of my life has been laid out, and every day of my life has been recorded in your book. Of all of God's creation, I think you and me, we're the only ones who struggle with this aspect of going. Anyone like Animal Planet enthusiast or Nat Geo? Okay, some of us good, yes. So I love watching these documentaries, I guess. And so I was watching this documentary, and it was about Southeast Asia, and it was about during the tsunami, when the tsunami hit. So in 2010, a tsunami hit the shores of Southeast Asia, displacing 20,000 people. 535 people passed away, and over 4,000 buildings were destroyed. All in all, this total town was devastated. But what the Nat Geo program was on was, of everything that was destructed, the animal population wasn't really impacted. So they had this reporter, Roger Highfield, who was in the area at the time when he was writing about the experience. And he writes that before the giant wave slammed into the Asian coastline, animals seemed to know what was about to happen and that it was time to go. Reports stated that the local elephant population trumpeted loudly, and they just booked it. They broke through fences and they ran for high ground. That bats and birds all of a sudden took the air. That flamingos, who always stayed in their low-lying areas, also took off and left. And reports from the zoo is that all of a sudden, before it hit, every animal just returned to their cages, to the safety of their cages, and the zookeepers couldn't figure out why they are all acting so strange. This is fascinating. Several tourists were in a elephant, like, the pictures where people ride the elephants. They're in an elephant refugee center. So several tourists reported that while they were there, all of a sudden, the elephants, who had once been docile and calm and tranquil, started acting bizarre. They all got really trumpeting loud. They immediately started ignoring their handlers, and they broke through fences, including some used their trunks and picked up people and just booked it for the high ground. Scariest experience you can imagine in your life. So once they got to the high ground, the handlers there tried to coax the elephants back down the hill for over 15 minutes. They couldn't understand why these animals were all acting so strange. But after trying to coax for 15 minutes, the handlers and everyone else finally saw what the animals had sensed, that it was time to go. When we look at our lives, I think it's easy for us to find comfort in the past because the past is known. It's not mysterious, it's safe, it already happened. It's a road we have traveled. However, it is not in the past where we find life. It's not in the past where we find the promise that God is leading us for our tomorrow. Jesus, speaking to a group of religious teachers in Mark 12, said, "Have you not read the book of Moses? In the account of the burning bush, how God said to him, 'I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.' He is the God of the dead. He is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living." And life is found in today and in tomorrow. And God is always calling and always leading us forward. Deuteronomy 1:30, "The Lord your God who is going before you will fight for you." John 14:2, "There is more than enough room in my Father's house. If this were not so, would I have told you that I am going on ahead of you to prepare a place for you?" Acts 17:28, "For in him we live, we move, and we exist." In the book of Genesis, God gives Abraham this amazing promise. He says, "I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as numerous as the grains of sand on the seashore. Your descendants will possess the gates of their enemies. And through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed." That's a big promise. That's huge. But as we just read earlier, in order for Abram, later be known as Abraham, to receive this promise, he had to do one thing first. Go from your country, go from your people, and go from your father's household to the land that I will show you. Abraham had to go, he had to move. He had to follow where God was leading to experience the promise that he had in store for him. So the question I have for us is, where is God leading us today? Where is God leading us today? Fear is going to try to keep us in place, keep us from making changes or moving in a different direction. But God, we have a God who is here today. We have a God who is in our today and in our tomorrow and is calling and leading us. For our 8th graders, God might be calling us to Redondo or to Peninsula or to PV or to Costa or to South or to West or to Torrance or to Bishop or to Chadwick or a number of other schools. God's calling us to new relationships, new friendships, new experiences, new obstacles, and new triumphs. And my encouragement for each and every one of you guys is that we would go. We would go knowing that God is with us and that God is for us. And when we look back on our past, we would celebrate our teachers, the faculty, the staff, our friends, the experiences we got to share, the obstacles we got to overcome. But let us not live looking back. Let us live in our presence and live into where God is leading us. You guys pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you that you love us, God, that you know our today, you know our tomorrow, you know our 10 years from now. God, even as we look at the road, as we look at our future, and there's so much unknown, the one thing we know is that you are with us, and that you are for us, and that you are leading us. So God, the areas of our life where we feel scared to make a move, we feel scared to continue. God, I pray that we could rest in your presence and we could have the courage to go where you're leading. God, for our 8th graders, I pray that you would just bless them in this new life experience. You'd send them amazing relationships, amazing friendships, amazing experiences so that they could be more like the men and women that you created them to be. Thank you for the love you have for us. In your name we pray.